We're going to review lessons 3 through 5, adding integers, subtracting integers, and adding and subtracting rational numbers. So the first lesson we're looking at, lesson 3, was on adding integers. So if you look at this first problem, the cell phone came with 64 gigabytes of memory. He's used 15 gigabytes, then he uses 5 megabytes. And this should be actually gigabytes. I think it's corrected in your book. We're not going to convert megabytes and gigabytes today. So use the addition expression to find out how much memory is left on his phone. So they've got this set up. Two different ways you could do this problem. One way we could just work it across. Other way, everything's being added, so if you wanted to, you could get your negatives together, get your positives together. They're already together, and then see what you get. So negative 15 plus negative 5, how many negatives do we have altogether? 20, okay? So that gets us to a little bit simpler problem now. 64 plus negative 20. We can look at these, and then we could say that they're different signs, means we need to subtract, okay? They're working against each other here. And which do we have more of? More positives, okay? Which is a good thing because negative memory is not going to work. All right, so he's still got 44 gigabytes of memory left. Okay. Similar idea, number 2. Stella walks down a flight of stairs to the basement, and she walks back up the stairs and up another flight of stairs to the second floor. Each flight of stairs represent a change of 12 feet in height. How far is Stella above ground? Well, she walked down, then she walked back up, and then she walked up 1. So really, I mean, we could say it's like a negative 12 and then plus a 12 and plus another 12. Or if you kind of think about what's happening here, you might be able to think about that she's actually in all just going up 12 feet from where she started at. If we look at number 3, part A, they want us to find the sum. And again, even though it says sum, doesn't always mean that we're going to add the numbers together. We have to think about the signs, whether they're the same or not. So this problem, these have different signs. We got positives and we have negatives. So they're working against each other here. It means we're going to subtract them. And when you work that out, you get 49. So we have more positives than negatives, so our answer would just be a positive 49 for that one. We go to part B, and we've got another problem here. Negative 121 plus a negative 34. This time our numbers are on the same team. They're on the negative team. So we are going to be adding these together. They're working together, so we add them together. And since they're both negative, this is a bunch of negatives. Kind of like if we borrowed $121 and then we borrowed another $34, we would owe $155 altogether. If we go to part D, 109 plus negative 162. So this one, they're different signs. 109 is positive, 162 is negative, so different signs, we will take the difference. We're going to subtract them. They're working against each other here, different teams. So we subtract, we get 53. And then this time we had more that were negative than positive, so our answer would be negative 53. Kind of like if you had $109 and you spent $162, you're going to owe $53. We'll look at lesson 4 is on subtracting integers. So subtracting integers, remember our saying was add the opposite, make 2 sign changes on the problem. So number 1, temperature is 1 degree Fahrenheit at dusk. It's 8 degrees colder at dawn. What's the temperature at dawn? So we could think about this. If it's 1 degree and then 8 degrees colder means the temperature is going to go down 8. So we could say 1 minus 8. And like I said, subtracting, we can add the opposite, make it into an addition problem. Once we make it into addition problem, just like we did in the previous lesson. So different signs, we're going to subtract these. Is 7. I had more that were negative, so the answer would be a negative 7 degrees Fahrenheit. Number 2, Kyle and Nadim are on the same space on a board game they are playing. Kyle moves back 2 spaces, then moves back 3 more spaces. Nadim has remained in the same place. What integer represents Kyle's location relative to Nadim's location on the game board? So if he moved back 2 and then moves back 3 more. This you could write either as addition or subtraction. Moving back 2 would be like a negative 2, and then moving back 3 more. You could say negative 2 then minus 3, or you could look at it as 2 separate things, negative 2 plus a negative 3. And if we do it as a subtraction problem, we do our sign changes, add the opposite here. We're on the same page now, negative 2 plus negative 3, which would be negative 5. So negative 5. Nadim maybe lost a turn, which maybe is better off in this case because Kyle had to keep moving backwards. So, all right, and then we'll look at a couple problems here on number 3. Let's look at B and D. So part B, negative 18 minus negative 55. So first thing on this problem, it's a subtraction problem, so we can add the opposite. Change subtraction to addition. Opposite of negative 55 is a positive 55. Again, always 2 sign changes in the middle of the problem. Now we look at these, negative 18, positive 55. They're different signs, so we're going to subtract them. When we subtract, we get 37. We had more that were positive, so final answer would be a positive 37. Look at part D, 70 minus negative 101. Same idea, they're subtracting, so we can add the opposite, 2 sign changes. At that point, everything's positive, so this one would just be adding those together, would be 171. Let's skip back over here to part C since it's slightly different than those 2 we just looked at. We already did one earlier like this, but negative 17 minus 44. Again, we can add the opposite, make our 2 sign changes here. At that point, these are all negatives, so they're working together. So we can add those together. Is 61, and we all have negatives here, so would be a negative 61. Lesson 5 is adding and subtracting rational numbers, so we might have decimals and fractions. We could have one or both on these. So number 1, Doug digs a hole that's 1 and 7/10 feet below ground level, and he plants a bush 3 2/10 feet tall from the bottom of the root to the top branch. How much of the bush is above ground? Okay, so this is going down into the hole. So there's different ways you could look at this. What the book's doing is they're saying, well, 1.7 feet below the ground, that's like a negative 1.7. And then the bush from that point will go up 3 2/10. Now 3 2/10, we can easily get that to a decimal, 3 2/10. At that point we're adding, so we don't need to make any sign changes here. These are different signs, so we can subtract. is 1 5/10, so which is positive, which is probably a good thing that our bush is above the ground 1.5 feet. It's not all below the ground. Wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. If we go down to number 3, part D, this subtraction, so we can go ahead and add the opposite. You'll notice the first one's a fraction, the second one's a decimal. So the fraction 1/8, we can actually change that to a decimal. Is 125 thousandths, so that's negative 125 thousandths plus negative 356 thousandths. These numbers are both negative, so we can add those together. And it's all negative, so negative 481 thousandths. So this gives you an idea how to add and subtract integers and rational numbers.